Kent, it's been just over a month since Nunavut reported their first positive case of the COVID-19 virus. What's the situation like today?
Well, the good news, Melissa, is that Nunavut's COVID-19 outbreak is down to one community. Now, that's the community of Arviat. It's just north of Churchill, Manitoba, if you want to straighten out where it is in your head. Now, all the cases in Whale Cove, Rankin Inlet, and Santa Kilowak, they've all recovered. As of today, there are 44 active cases of COVID-19 in Nunavut, all in Arviat, and there have been 258 cases total. That means 214 people in Nunavut have recovered from COVID-19.
Why is Arviat the one place with remaining cases? Did something different happen there?
Well, I asked our Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Michael Patterson, about that earlier this week, specifically about what's different in Arviat. And you got to remember, Arviat has an overcrowding problem. It's not uncommon to see 3 generations living in one roof, but that's pretty common throughout the territory as well. Now, the health department's considering the idea that there may have been a super spreader. Now, in some rare cases, someone who has COVID-19 can be asymptomatic and spread at a much higher rate than people ordinarily do when they have the virus. So they're starting to consider that there was a lot of spread before the first case was actually detected, possibly by a super spreader. Now, you also have to wonder how effective has the actual lockdown in Arviat been. Just last week, our health minister, Lauren Kusagak, he was pleading with residents there to follow the conditions that have been in place. To quote him, quote, "If you would listen for 2 weeks, this could all go away. This is so preventable. Just listen." And he added, "Now you know who you are. If you've been told that you've tested positive, please stop people in your house from visiting." And that's a really direct message from our health minister.
I love that. You know who you are. How are Nunavut holding up? Arviat's still obviously in a serious lockdown, but some of the conditions have been loosened in the territory.
Yeah, the restrictions are starting to show on us, to be honest, Melissa. Like in Arviat, for example, one local store decided they wanted to do an outdoor scavenger hunt, sort of as a fun thing for the customers. And residents there were not very happy with the idea of people even gathering together outside during the pandemic. And also in Arviat, the people I've been talking to there, there's a growing call for enforcement. There's been no fines levied against people for breaking regulations so far, and it's getting really frustrating for the people in Arviat who are following the conditions to see others not following the conditions, and they're calling for fines to be levied. Now, and then you go to Cambridge Bay. This is a wild one. In Cambridge Bay this week, the 2 postmasters for the whole community quit basically in the middle of a shift.
Yeah.
And they put up a sign on their way out. They put a sign in the window that said, and I'm quoting, "I quit. Good luck getting your parcels now." There's been a lot of pressure on Canada Post employees throughout this entire pandemic. A spokesperson from the Postmasters and Assistants Association says that aggression from customers towards post office employees has gone up 98% under COVID. And one of the things, aside from people complaining about their mail, there was a limit of 3 people in that post office, and they were being forced to enforce that, and masks being worn were mandatory in the post office. And that was a lot of pressure on the postmasters. So, yeah, the cracks are showing a little.
There's news this week that the Moderna vaccine is going to be headed to the territories. Why did they pick that vaccine, and what's the rollout going to look like?
Well, the Pfizer vaccine needs some serious freezing. It's cold in Nunavut, but it's not -70 cold all the time. Now, the Moderna one, it's deemed the easier to handle of the 2, and it's easier to execute in Nunavut's 25 different communities. It travels better than Pfizer. So it's looking now like we can see our first vaccinations before the end of this year. Nunavut's prioritizing healthcare workers and nursing home residents as the first people to get the vaccine, and they say they're going to have enough doses for 75% of the adult population. Now, that's a bit of a catch there because half of Nunavut's population is age 25 or under. So even if we get that 75% vaccination among adults, that's still a lot of unvaccinated people out there. So the health department anticipates that they'll be keeping our 2-week mandatory quarantine before entering Nunavut intact for quite some time to come, Melissa.
Thanks for all of this, Kent. Always a pleasure talking to you. Stay healthy.
Quyanamik, Melissa, always a pleasure.